Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Talking Leadership. This is Eric Perez, welcoming you back to our ongoing series of podcasts discussing the issue of leadership. And today I'm going to be looking at that through the prism of the entrepreneur. So, by way of introduction to today's guest, she is the founder of SheEO.World. Can I welcome to the podcast Vicki Saunders? How are you, Vicki?
I'm really good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate your time. So, Let's start where I always start with these podcasts. Could you give me, if you can, in one paragraph or less, what was your pathway to becoming an entrepreneur?
I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. I actually never really thought I'd be an entrepreneur, but I've always been seeking where I could be the most free and have the most impact. And there's something about this. I sort of happened upon becoming an entrepreneur, but it was really driven by my desire to create a better world. And so I've always used business as the container for having a major impact in the world, which I'm 55 years old, so it wasn't always a thing. Before you would make money and then give it away. And I've always been this sort of social entrepreneur mindset.
Thank you for sharing that. So that segues nicely into the next question, because I'll make this one theme, but in three elements, if you'll indulge me. I wanted to know from you what you see, if there is a difference between leaders and entrepreneurs, and then in that context, what do you believe are the differences between those two and a social entrepreneur?
Interesting. So there are lots of different definitions out there about what an entrepreneur is. And a lot of them have to do with maximizing profit and taking big risks. That I don't resonate with that definition. Many, many years ago, I read a book called Disclosing New Worlds by these amazing Latin American guys, Francisco Varela and Robert Maturana. And they talked about entrepreneurship as history making. And I was like, yes, that's my definition. It's someone who is making history by seeing something that isn't out there, or noticing something that feels unjust, or something that they want to shift, and then using the business structure to create change. And so I think when I think of a leader, I think of someone who steps out of their comfort zone and walks a path in front of others, oftentimes. And I see entrepreneurs as being very similar. So this entrepreneur, all the words that we've been creating. For me, it's someone who steps into their leadership, into a place of discomfort, to go execute on a vision. And in my world, everything has to be, there's only one point to using your leadership right now, which is to solving the major challenges we're facing, or to work on things that really matter. Making more money, you can't eat it. We can't take it with us. We have so many challenges at this moment. And so I think this doing things just to make money feels empty at this time in our human experience.
Again, appreciate your candor with that response. I'd like to unpack that just a little bit more, because I think at the end of your response, you're referring to what is still a COVID-19 world. I'm not going to say post-COVID-19, because we're still all feeling the impacts to one degree or another. So do you think it's changed the mindset of entrepreneurs now that we've had a pandemic in what is 2020, when most people would have thought nothing like this could happen?
So many things have changed in terms of the conditions that we're in. And for me, every week has been like a decade, or a year. There's an interesting person named Scott Galloway in the US who had a nice framing that I really liked for this, where he sort of talked about whatever trends you were seeing in your business that you thought over the next decade would come true, they've come true in 10 weeks. So a decade has just happened in 10 weeks. And so I don't know about in Australia, but in Canada, universal basic income, the concept of that was not on the radar. We tested it out, we played with it, but we're basically have it right now. We're, paying people X amount of dollars per month because they've lost their jobs. 40% of jobs will probably be lost. They're not coming back. We need a solution for that. And so something that was inconceivable as a policy, till maybe I wasn't even here on this planet anymore, is now here. And so I think there are many, many conditions like this that have changed. I personally am only surrounded by people who are using their leadership for good and to solve major challenges we're facing. Those also are the businesses that have survived and thrived during this time. If you're working on essential services, if you're working on core elements that everybody needs, and if you have, advanced policies around hiring, around socially and environmentally sustainable kinds of businesses, you've fared quite well during this time. But everything's sort of upside down. So I wouldn't say that everyone's woken up, but the universe is sending us a lot of messages right now, right? The biases that exist in our system, our deep racism, the colonization of many of our minds, the biases that exist in systems, frontline workers being paid poorly so that we can sit at home and taking all kinds of risks, and how we've taken that for granted. Like, I just think there's a ton of lessons. It depends on the person whether or not they've taken those on to shift their thinking.
Okay, and that we could unpack that and make that a whole series of
there's a whole thing.
and a whole series of other podcasts, but we'll stick to this one. And I would agree that I'm seeing that, and most people are seeing that in Australia, particularly the difficulties of what does I'll take a step back. What does a full-time position, what does work mean now post this particular calamity? And I think people will be talking and writing about this for decades to come, because it's in some senses it's a seminal moment to have some discussions that weren't previously had, and in other senses people will try and just get on and do what they need to do, because we all need to work to make a living, and that's where the difficulty comes in. That response you gave, and I appreciate that, it segues nicely into the next theme that I've got is, for you, what's the most difficult part about being an entrepreneur?
Oh, so many things. It's funny because I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I'm like absolutely not employable by anybody else. So, the challenge of, you have to make the conditions for yourself to thrive, and there's no easy way of getting a paycheck to just show up at a door each day. Not that having a job that isn't being an entrepreneur is easy, not at all. It's not what I mean. But for me, it's this. There's so many things I want to say here. I don't even know where to start.
Say them all. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, so I sort of focus on the things that I love about being an entrepreneur. Like, I love the freedom of it. I love the energy that it gives me. I love the activation I feel inside myself when I see something and then go create around it. The hard part is if you have a different approach than what the world has. Like, for example, our model with SheEO is so different than the way the world operates. And so it's always hard when you're kind of ahead of the curve, kind of leading. So and I've always been definitely ahead of the curve with every company that I've done. SheEO is, I think, the first time that I really hit timing perfectly. But in many, many times in the past, timing is kind of everything you learn as an entrepreneur. So one of the things we ask to entrepreneurs we find is, why are you the person to solve this problem? And why is now the right time? Because that timing piece really does need to be aligned with the thing that you're trying to solve. And so I think those are things. When I was younger, I used to just, every month I'd be like, oh, I'm just going to go get a job. This is too hard, right? And I have built up a phenomenally crazy risk tolerance. I'm just kind of off the charts in terms of taking risks. And I've kind of built the muscle around that. And so I think that's a good or a bad, depending on how you want to look at it. Like, I'd risk it all to go follow my dreams because I just get so jazzed and excited by doing that. So I think those are a few things.
Yeah, and it speaks to this idea that for those of us that don't live in that world, that from the outside, we see risk as a no-go zone because you're comfortable doing what you're doing. And I don't see a problem with that, but you do need leaders and people in the community that are prepared to do the things that you're doing. And for those entrepreneurs that don't work in that social space, that are creating employment, not to say that social entrepreneurs don't do the same, but you need that mix of people. Otherwise, I think the world would be a significantly duller place. And there would be things that would not get done at the social level. And when you're talking about being a social entrepreneur, I guess those issues will be different to those that aren't playing in that space, I guess is the easiest way to say that. So moving on to something a bit more positive, how do you measure success, Vicki?
I sort of have a personal and a systems level kind of look at this. And so if I'm using myself well every day to the potential that if I'm living into my potential and contributing and being well used in the world, that's what matters a lot for me. And success for me is contributing whatever I've learned on my journey so far to help others on their journey. And so I feel like I have a pretty big ripple effect that I'm starting to build out, where I've mentored over 1,000 entrepreneurs. And that's one of the big success things for me, which is helping those who, I wish I had someone told me that a long time ago. I might not have followed it, but it would have been nice to know that there was someone out there looking after me.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt, but if you've
Yeah.
mentored 1,000, if they only mentor one person each, it gets extra.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's quite a good one. Sorry, it just stood out the number that when you're talking about looking at a metric for success, and that gets paid on. I think when people see you prepared to invest in them, they're prepared to do the same, I guess, or you would hope that they would do that. Given what you've said so far, you would hope that people take that on as part of their DNA.
There's probably a Buddhist, there's probably in many different religions and cultures, this kind of saying, but it's like when the teacher goes, or when the student goes beyond the teacher, that's success, right? And so to share what you have so that others can take that on and ripple out that into the world is part of the human journey. I think it's part of the goal.
Fully agree. Entrepreneurial capabilities. What would you say are the key capabilities from your experience, Vicki?
So mindset is one that comes up quite, a big deal for me, having a growth mindset. And so there's fixed mindset and growth mindset. I don't know if your listeners will have heard of this, but they can Google it. But this ability to just learn and to step into discovery. And I was actually having a call with my coach the other day, and she goes, "Oh, I just read something and it totally reminded me of you." It's like this person loves to discover that they're mistaken. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I love that." She goes, "Yes, you're completely off the charts with loving to discover that you are mistaken. I love experimenting and trying new things and being surprised." And I don't think that that's a normal feeling for a lot of people. I think a lot of people want to prove to themselves that their worldview is the way reality is and it's truth. Whereas I'm quite, I love being sort of uncomfortable on that learning journey. And I find that lots of other entrepreneurs are as well. Like they can walk into discomfort, they can walk into fear, and it doesn't stop them. It kind of propels them forward. I find that with a lot of entrepreneurs I know, when they get kind of like worried about, oh my God, that's going to be hard, it actually is a propellant as opposed to something that stops them. And in terms of other capabilities, there's just this amazing ability to sort of hold vision for what you want to achieve and bootstrap your way there. Find your way to it. That's a hard thing to do, holding both of those pieces together, because there's sort of a cognitive dissonance in the tension between those two things, which isn't always comfortable for people.
You think it's less comfortable for an entrepreneur that's just part of what you have to do to get to your end goal?
Yeah, I think it's part of the journey and part of the makeup. As hard as it is, the alternative is like literally me. I'm unemployable. I couldn't sit in someone's office and have them tell me what to do. Like it's just not possible. It's like not in my DNA. I could just never do it. And I'd be trying to reorganize the place in 5 minutes, and they'd be like, "Get out of here! You're way too disruptive."
Yeah, look, you bring up an interesting point, and one that's been covered in other discussions that I've had with entrepreneurs that. They couldn't see themselves doing work for somebody else because I guess, and please don't, I hope I don't cause offense by saying this, and for those listening that are entrepreneurs, I don't mean to be offensive, but what I see with entrepreneurs is that if you don't have the mindset, well, you can't tell me what to do, and I'm the one setting the agenda, that's anathema to what you're doing. You can't stomach that, because you need to be to have a degree of control. That's what I think I'm looking for. Is it a sense of control? And I don't mean that in a negative way, that you get to see where all the pieces fit on the chessboard, if I can use that analogy, and you'll be the one that will plan the steps ahead. And if someone else is doing that, you don't have that focus of control. Does that ring true?
Yeah. I think the word I would use would be autonomy. And so maybe not control, but it's like having this autonomous like relationship where I can go off and achieve what it is that I want to achieve. And so I'm trying to remember the name of the book right now, that the three core elements are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And so autonomy is one, and then mastery, the ability to like really get masterful at what you're amazing at. And so one of the things I often find is, in old performance reviews that they used to do in some businesses, they'd be like, "Hey, Eric, here are the 5 things that you're amazing at. Awesome. And here are the 7 things that you're not good at. Could you spend more time on those things you're not good at?" And I'm like, why would you ever do that? Why would you ever try and get better at things you're not good at? When focus on the things you're amazing at and become the master, because someone else on the team Like, this is how I hire, because then you hire people that are masterful at the stuff that you're not good at. But all of our structures and systems are set up in these boxes that you have to be good at 100% of this role. And it's crazy. So you get all this mediocrity.
Good leaders that I've been able to talk to on this podcast have suggested that they very much know what they're not good at, and finding people that can do and fill those elements of your makeup as a leader not only makes you better at what you're very good at doing, it also helps promote what other people are good at doing and helps them increase their mastery. And that's quite a good word that you've used there, Vicki. The next area, and I have 3 statements that I'd really like your view on if I could. Now, you've talked about this a lot. So entrepreneurs are risk takers. Now, you've said in this podcast that you have a massive risk appetite, but is that risks that you've helped to deal with? A calculated risk is what I'm looking for. Are they more calculated risks than anything, or are they just a risk and you're prepared to do that without sort of doing some pre-homework before you get in and go for it, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I am practical as well as audacious at the same time, right? So I have a lot of boldness in me in seeking out to create change. And I also understand, like, I'm here today at this level and I want to be like way up at 40,000 feet eventually. And how do I get there on the way? And, so I don't usually start by, let's create a rocket ship to get there and we'll raise all the money and off you go. It's how do we get there in a sort of bootstrap way? So I'm a kind of a classic bootstrapper. I'm not the bet it all on red kind of entrepreneur, right? That we have this crazy environment right now where it's just like risk insane is how I would call everything right now. It's like, let's put $1 billion on this and see if you can win the whole market. And if you don't, no problem, I'll bet $1 billion on someone else. And, everywhere we go, it's just kind of insane that way. So in terms of the way the risk in the world is, we live in a giant casino, as far as I can tell, with our money right now. It's not that kind of risk, but to your point, I think it's a calculated risk on the edge of calculated risk. Let's just put it that way. As I was saying once to one of my coaches, I just don't really resonate with that word risk. Like, I don't view that as a risk. And she goes, yeah, because you're off the charts. That's why. You don't resonate with it because you don't measure, like, you're not on this scale like most people. I've lived almost all of my life with, less than a couple of months of cash flow in front of me. And I can sleep still living that way. Most people are like, what? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So that's a pretty scary thing,
I would fall into that camp very much so. Entrepreneurs are persistent.
Yeah, well, we have to be, I suppose. I mean, this is, again, part of this piece. And it's a tough one, right? Because not letting go of your vision and really continuing to chase after it and to pursue it, but also knowing when to let go. Like, hey, the timing's not right. That's also hard too. So I find this to be quite a very unique tension that only your intuition can tell you what to do here. But yeah, I mean, I'm like with a dog with a bone. I don't know if you have the same phrase. In Australia,
yes.
But very much so. Like, I'm just like, I'm going to figure this out. I know I can do it. And I've hit lots of breaking points along the way many, many times. And this is where community really comes in for me. I've surrounded myself with a lot of people that support me. They're not yes people, but they're there for me when I have a total meltdown. And that is something I didn't have when I was younger. And it served me so well as I've gotten older to get in communities and to find the others. So that you can go on this journey with others, because I find being an entrepreneur is a very isolated experience in many ways. And we're kind of conditioned to think that we should do this all on our own. And everything is so much easier in community.
Yeah, and this is you're foreshadowing one of my next themes. So I'll very much come back to that. So the last statement here is entrepreneurs are innovators.
100%. So it's, coming up with a new idea, and innovation has a bunch of different things, right? It's either like coming up with something completely new, or this other kind of combinatorial innovation, which I've heard of, where it takes bits and pieces of learning from other and puts it together in unique ways. Like the iPhone isn't a brand new innovation. It was a combinatorial innovation where he picked all kinds of different pieces and put them together in a unique way. So I would definitely agree with that statement.
Brilliant. So let's move on to this next topic area. And you've like I said before, you foreshadowed it, and you've mentioned a coach several times during the podcast. So the area what I'd like to chat to you about, if we could, is mentoring. Now, like you, I came to mentoring later in my career. I'm what I would call middle-aged at 45 years old. I've learned some stuff on my travels, and I've surrounded myself with networks of people that aren't yes people, but there are people I can rely on to give me a bit of a critical ideas and mindset check when I need it. Tough love is sometimes the terminology used, because you can get married to an idea so much and not see the negatives to it that someone that's not involved can do that for you. So whether you call it coaching or mentoring, one, has it been critical to your success? And two, does it matter whether that mentoring is formal or informal, Vicki?
To me, it doesn't matter if it's formal or informal. I'm much more of an informal kind of person anyway. I've built up a really large network over the course of my life, finding people who are masterful at all kinds of different things I've needed along the way. So I've rarely been in a singular one-person mentorship for more than a couple of years at a time. There's always growth, something fits energetically and then it doesn't afterwards. And I would also say the difference between mentorship and advisor. So a mentor is someone who, from my definition of it, a mentor is someone who it works on the person, who cares about you deeply as a person, full stop. Whereas an advisor, oftentimes in a business setting, is more about a specific skill or specific focus on a sector. So I think it's quite easy to find advisors around those skills. I think it's more like when you find a mentor, it's more like getting married. There's a real values fit. There's a really strong, deep connection and personal, like soulmate almost kind of vibe with it. And so I find it so, sometimes people will come up to me and, will you be my mentor? And I'm like, what's your name? Like, I don't even know who you are. And you're like wanting me to be in this deep relationship. And I think it's partly because it means I want to learn with you. And to me, the way to do that is actually building a relationship. And it's important that you get to know each other first to see if there's actually a fit. There are many people who have totally different values alignment, and just because they're successful doesn't mean you should follow them. Like if you are not connected to the way that they've done things in the past, that can be really detrimental to your growth as a person. So I think there's a bit of work to be done in that. But in general, there's nothing like having someone to be accountable to, especially as an entrepreneur. You don't usually have that, and to be in a learning relationship with. It's really
so secretly you do want a boss. It's not just you want to do it. Yeah, and so again, I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying. That sometimes having someone come in and giving you a bit of a check on what you're doing may make you stop for a second and look at something a little bit differently, because I've again, speaking to entrepreneurs and speaking to leaders in this podcast process, one thing that has come up is the ability to build an ego that can take a couple of hits now and then is critically important for your own personal growth. Because fortunately I've not met anybody that said I've got the answers for everything that I do. No one can teach me something else. I think as soon as someone falls in that mindset, there's not much more growth that is possible, I would have thought.
Yeah. I mean, I've met lots of people that aren't coachable, and you're just like, move on. Right. But the accountability piece, one of the things I know about myself, and again, to be successful and to push towards your mastery means you actually know who you are. That's a really important thing to be studying. I know that I'm pressure prompted. Nothing like a deadline for me. If there's no deadline, I don't get anything done. My house doesn't get cleaned unless I have a party. Like, I just know that about myself. So when my house needs to be cleaned, I have a dinner party. And so I use that against myself to get things done. And so I think knowing that about yourself and setting your life up to support you on the goal, on the path towards your goals is important.
Fully agree. So Vicki, last theme I'd like to just ask you about, and this one, I always ask this because I think there is a tension here, and it's not a bad one. It's just finding out what you believe on in this particular theme is, do you believe entrepreneurs are born or made?
Born. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please explain.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just you can't take a course to be an entrepreneur. That's not a thing as far as I'm concerned. There's like a DNA setting in the body. I think you can cultivate an entrepreneurial mindset. I think you can cultivate a lot of skills around this, but I think there's this vibe that I think that most entrepreneurs I know are just unemployable. I really do. And it's they are set to go off and find their own path. So yeah, that's how I feel.
Vicki, thank you again for your time. And for those listening, I've been speaking to Vicki Saunders, the founder of SheEO.World. Vicki, thank you again for your time.
My pleasure.
And for those listening, this has been Talking Leadership